A Wolf's Bride. Chapter 1. The Wolf and the Lamb. Elias Crow was a man of many faces. To the world, he was a brilliant forensic psychologist, an expert who delved into the minds of society's most depraved criminals to uncover the truth. But beneath the polished surface lay a darker persona. Elias had a gift, one that blurred the lines between justice and villainy. He could manipulate minds, bending people's thoughts and actions to his will. It wasn't just his profession, it was his art. Jessica Crow adored her husband. She had married him not just for his intellect or his striking good looks, but for the way he made her feel seen in a world that often overlooked her. Elias's intensity was magnetic, his attention intoxicating. And while she knew he carried secrets, she believed in their love, a love that felt unbreakable despite its flaws. But even a wolf, no matter how devoted, has fangs. Chapter 2. The Unspoken Pact. Jessica stood in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared dinner. The scent of rosemary and garlic filled the air, and the warm glow of the evening sun filtered through the windows. It was their ritual. Elias would return from his office, and they would share a meal, their lives intertwining seamlessly. But tonight, Elias was late. When he finally walked through the door, his face was grim, his usual composed demeanor fraying at the edges. Jessica greeted him with a kiss, but he barely responded, brushing past her to pour himself a drink. "What's wrong?" she asked, concern lacing her voice. Elias downed his whiskey in one gulp before turning to her, his dark eyes gleaming. "I'm working on a case. A murderer. He's clever, almost too clever. It's frustrating." Jessica studied him, sensing there was more he wasn't saying. But she didn't press. She had learned that Elias revealed things in his own time, and pushing him often led to a colder distance. That night, as they lay in bed, Elias traced patterns on her back with his fingers. His touch was gentle, but his thoughts were far away. Jessica, half asleep, murmured, "You'll catch him, Elias. You always do." Elias smiled faintly, though she couldn't see it. "Of course, my love," he whispered. But in his mind, he wasn't thinking about catching the killer. He was thinking about how much more exhilarating it was to let him run free, how he could shape the narrative, control the game. Because Elias knew something Jessica didn't. The killer wasn't a stranger. He was someone Elias had guided, pushed, manipulated into acting. The crime, the chaos, it was all a dance, and Elias was the choreographer. Chapter 3. The First Crack. Jessica was no stranger to secrets. She had grown up in a household where love was conditional, where silence was currency. Marrying Elias had felt like escaping that life, but as the years passed, she began to see shadows in their relationship. Small lies, half-truths that made her question the man she had vowed to love. One afternoon, while cleaning Elias's study, Jessica found a file tucked beneath a stack of papers. It was labeled with a name she didn't recognize, Matthew Dane. Curiosity gnawed at her, and she opened it. Inside were detailed psychological profiles, interviews, and crime scene photos. The gruesome images made her stomach turn, but what chilled her most was the handwritten note at the bottom of the page. "The wolf guides the pack." Jessica's hands trembled as she read the words over and over. What did it mean? And why had Elias hidden this from her? A knot of unease formed in her stomach, but she forced herself to put the file back where she had found it. She couldn't confront Elias. Not yet. She needed to understand more. Chapter 4. The Manipulation. Elias noticed the change in Jessica almost immediately. She was quieter, her smiles less frequent. She avoided his gaze during dinner, her fingers toying nervously with her fork. "You're distracted," Elias said one evening, his tone light but probing. Jessica forced a smile. "Just tired. Work's been demanding lately." Elias nodded, though he didn't believe her. He could feel her slipping away, and it unnerved him. Jessica was his anchor, the one person who tethered him to a semblance of normalcy. If she began to doubt him, his carefully constructed world could collapse. That night, Elias waited until Jessica was asleep before retrieving the file from his study. He saw the slight misalignment, the faint smudges on the edges. She had found it. She had seen something she wasn't supposed to. Instead of panic, Elias felt a strange thrill. This was a new game, a dangerous one, but a game nonetheless. And Elias loved to play. Chapter 5. The Wolf's Snare. Jessica couldn't shake the feeling that she was living with a stranger. The man she had loved so deeply now felt like a shadow, his presence both comforting and menacing. She began to dig deeper, piecing together fragments of conversations, stray documents, and things Elias had said over the years. The picture that emerged was terrifying. Elias wasn't just a forensic psychologist. He was a manipulator, a puppet master who used his knowledge of the human mind to control others. The cases he worked on weren't just about catching killers, they were about creating them. The realization shattered something inside Jessica. She loved Elias, but how could she reconcile that love with the monster he truly was? Desperate for clarity, Jessica reached out to an old friend, a journalist named Lila. Together, they began to unravel Elias's secrets. But as they delved deeper, Jessica discovered something even more devastating. Elias knew. He had known all along that she was investigating him. And he had let her. Chapter 6. Betrayal's Bite. One night, Jessica confronted Elias. "How long have you known?" she demanded, her voice shaking. Elias leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Known what, Jessica? That you've been spying on me? That you've been feeding information to Lila?" Jessica's heart sank. "Elias, He held up a hand, silencing her. "Don't. Do you have any idea what you've done? You've put yourself in danger. You've put us in danger." Tears welled in Jessica's eyes. "I did it because I love you. Because I needed to understand you." Elias's gaze softened, just for a moment. He stood and walked toward her, cupping her face in his hands. "You think you've uncovered some great truth about me, Jessica, but you haven't. You've only scratched the surface." Her breath hitched as his lips brushed against her forehead. "You wanted the wolf, my love," he murmured. "Now you have him." Chapter 7. The Ultimate Betrayal. The next morning, Jessica woke to find Elias gone. A note lay on his pillow. "I had to protect us. Trust me." But trust was a fragile thing, and Jessica's heart was already fractured. She didn't know if Elias's actions were meant to save them, or to save himself. Days turned into weeks, and Elias remained elusive. Jessica tried to move on, but the scars of their love ran too deep. She found herself torn between the man she adored and the monster she feared. And then, one night, Elias returned. He was blooded, his clothes torn, but his eyes burned with a fierce determination. "It's over," he said, collapsing into her arms. "I've tied up the loose ends." Jessica didn't ask for details. She didn't want to know. Epilogue. The Wolf's Bride. Elias and Jessica stayed together, bound by a love that was as twisted as it was unbreakable. They had betrayed each other, hurt each other, but in the end, they couldn't let go. Their relationship was a dance of shadows, a delicate balance between trust and deception. Jessica knew Elias would always be the wolf, and she would always be his bride. And though the darkness between them would never fade, it was the only place they truly belonged.